everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are back with another review for you. Um, my name is Juan, here with Kevin,
Hello, everybody.
and we like movies. And on this edition of the podcast, we have a film that I selected. It is a 2021 film. The title of it is The Green Knight. It is directed by David Lowery. It stars Dev Patel, Alicia Vikander, and Joel Edgerton. It was also, I guess, adapted, you could say, by David Lowery. It's based off of the old English Arthurian tale, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Um, and let's see, the film was produced by A24, a company you may be familiar with, among others, including Braun Studios. And it has a runtime of 130 minutes. It released on July 30th, 2021, pretty much right smack dab in the middle of COVID, which may have affected some of its reception. The movie has a budget of 15 million and went on to make 18.9 million dollars. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 89% score by from the critics and a mere 50% audience score from over 1,000 reviews. So it's clearly a film that split its audience. Critics seem to have loved it. Audiences were not as enthused about it. And one thing, Kevin, that I realized we never really share is, I mean, we have before, I think, but not usually, is where our audience, if they want to, can find this movie to
Oh,
stream. Not that they can't use Google themselves and find it just like we do, but I, for one, had a choice between YouTube, which has it for free, and Tubi, which also has it for free, both with ads. I went with YouTube, but I immediately um, was presented a screen which said that the film had been modified, not just the screen size, but also even had been cut up a certain way. So I
oh.
immediately shut that off and went over to Tubi and had a great experience. A few ads, which don't bother me none. What about you, Kevin? Where did you stream it?
I actually saw it for free on Vudu. So
Okay.
VUDU.
Mm-hmm.
Funny experience because the girls are never used to watching ads anymore, so they were watching it with me. They're like, "What is this?" I'm like, "It's a commercial break, baby."
Uh huh.
So it was just funny.
Yeah. So there are, yeah, some really good services out there with great movies. Tubi is very popular for its catalog and its wide selection. So you don't got to pay these days as long as you have a solid internet connection.
I will say you can see it catch it a lot of places for free, which should tell you something about the movie.
Well, that tells me a lot more about your opinion of the movie. More of that to come. Again, thank you for clicking play and checking out this review. I understand this may be a movie that not everyone is familiar with or has even heard of. But again, thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, if you like what we do, drop us a comment, drop us a like, follow, and if you are so inclined, go ahead and share with your audience. That would be really helpful, and we would be very appreciative of that. Um, okay. remember too that you can go back and look at every movie that we reviewed, as well as every rating that we have provided for those films on our website, which is welikemovies.wordpress.org. I want to say. You can find all those details in the description to the show. But now we proceed. And again, since this was my pick, I will share why I picked this and also give a taste of my review of the film. um, I was just intrigued by this. I are actually um, our partner in this, who's been MIA. He was really excited about this movie when the trailer was released. He was, I think, very familiar with the tale and also is just a fan of adventure, both Arthurian and is a big Dungeons and Dragons and all
Yep.
that kind of type of stuff is right up his alley. Talking about Mark, of course. What were you going to say?
So yeah, fantasy adventure.
Yes, there you go. So he was super intrigued by it, which intrigued me. Once I saw it, I realized that I was somewhat familiar with this story, though it's been a long time. We actually studied this in college, although I think it was one of those classes where I wasn't, I was kind of checked out. But I do remember talking about this. And so while the film is based on that story, it does deviate a little bit and definitely adds its own interpretation. So anyway, and the trailer is really good too. I mean, I think that we'll probably both agree that visually and the way that it kind of handles some of those fantasy characteristics, I think, are done really well, in my opinion. That comes across really clearly in the trailer. It's intriguing. Um, I think special effects were pretty good. And yeah, I don't know. I think I was just in the mood for a story like this. Um, I I enjoyed the movie, um, while um, while I can see and felt that it is a very challenging watch. It's slow, it drags a little bit. It's not really action packed or anything like that. If you're comparing, like Kevin said, fantasy adventure, recently Dungeons and Dragons, the movie was a huge hit. This is really nothing like that. This is a lot more cerebral, profound, asks a lot of questions that linger afterward because the ending is very open ended. And so while it was a very challenging movie, I enjoyed it and I was um, pretty engaged the entire time, and I enjoyed even the process afterward of kind of going back, thinking through it, and determining, maybe what my um, take on, ultimately what happened was. So that's kind of my 2 cents. What do you got, Kev?
All right. So one of the earliest books I can remember reading, and I still have it, is John Steinbeck's The Acts of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And I vaguely remember the Green Knight. There are things I remember about it. So when I watched this, I was like, all right, I'm not going to bring anything into it. You said it's 130 minutes. There's times where I felt like, oh wow, this is 130 minutes. Like
Mm,
I'm feeling every minute. There's other times where I thought it was really good. Ultimately, I thought it was. I have no problem with what we saw visually, even some of the choices, that we saw the director was making. I think moreover, it's the narrative. I think could have been done a little bit better. I do think there were some interesting points. Did you stay for after the credits, by the way?
of course not.
Oh well, there was a scene after the credits which which I liked because it even expanded more on that ending with the Green Knight.
I mean, I did. The scene is on YouTube, and I did
Yeah.
look it up, and I don't see what
Well,
it adds.
we'll get to it. I'll tell you why it added something to me.
Okay.
So like the ending to me like salvaged the film because at some parts like again I was struggling to stay awake to watch it. That's just because it would start going really slow, and then
Hmm.
I was like okay I got to sit up to watch this, and then the next thing I know the whole Earth is turning upside down. I'm like what is happening right now? But like those parts were just I think they looked good, but even there's no criticism. It just I felt like some of those scenes took really long time like just to develop,
Hmm.
and I felt like the narrative could have been a little more clear on, you know, why was the Green Knight summoned? Why did his mom summon the Green Knight? You know, they could have developed. I think the acting was well done, and there were just things. And again, and then what increased is after I did went and looked up some stuff afterwards, looked more into the Green Knight. This again, I still think it was a little bit of missed opportunity in the narrative that I wish they would have just streamlined a little bit better, so it could have just been presented more like, hey, this is what we're trying to get across about who Gawain is, and you know, and him trying to mature and find who he is as a hero.
Yeah, I think those are, or that is a fair critique. Um, this director, David Lowery, has done some movies that I've heard of. He did Pete's Dragon in 2016. He has done a movie that I was always intrigued by, but I've never seen, called The Ghost Story, that came out in 2018. And then the other ones I really have never heard of. Um, but yeah, I feel like actually I would have liked to have seen what this film would have looked like in the hands of a director like Robert Eggers. I think that would have been really exciting because he does action really well, although he's not perfect at either and is still young. But yeah, I agree. I think this could have been done a little bit more with the audience in mind, and I think with the casual viewer, and I think that the critiques that you're bringing up are probably why 50% of the people who watch this did not enjoy it. um, I don't fault them for that. Again, it is very challenging. For me, it was worth the challenge, though. But I'd like to, for those who don't have a background into this story, I'd like to give them a little bit of background. And I think that since you're a little bit more familiar and even did a little bit of background work, Kevin, why don't you share sort of the plot of the movie with the people?
Well, basically, the Green Knight is a story of Gawain is Arthur's nephew. In the beginning of the story, he's a little immature. He's trying to become a knight, all this stuff, and then this Green Knight comes. Like again, I'm not sure if in the regular story his mom summons. I know in this one he does. And the Green Knight says, "Hey, anyone who could chop off my head can have my weapon. You'll have a story to tell, but in 1 year time, I get to return the favor. However you strike me."
Wait, so are you describing the
No, the story,
the
yeah,
classic tale or the
yeah.
film?
No, the classic tale, because that this all is set up almost the same.
Well,
You know
but
what I mean?
in the film, he doesn't say "chop off my head." He says,
Well, not
"Land
chop
a
off.
blow on me."
Yeah,
Well,
land a blow,
uh huh,
but he chops off his head even in the story,
uh huh.
and and what?
Well, and also let's share that the Green Knight is not a human.
Oh yeah, he's like he looks like a Groot. He's
Yeah,
like a
he's like
tree.
a tree. He's really cool looking in the movie. That was one of my favorite. I wish I would have liked to even more of the Green Knight.
Yeah, like he was awesome. He was really well done, and the story's supposed to like as it unravels what it is. It's the year that now he knows that after he chopped off his head, he has to go see him, but he kind of doesn't want to do it, and he's growing in this next year from this immature kid to all right, he's becoming more chivalrous. He's learning how to have honor. He's doing all this stuff, and there's a couple other things that happen in there that he's trying to weasel his way out of it. But he finds out he has to go, and instead of a sash, he has like a girdle, and it's all about when he meets up with the Green Knight, being honest with him and saying, "Hey, I have this." And in the story of the Green Knight, it's about him being being basic quote unquote man enough and having honor enough to say, "Hey, I'm going to face my destiny." But he kind of cheats, and he has this immortal girdle that like won't let him get hacked, and so he only gets nicked. But then he confesses to the Green Knight, and the Green Knight, like, it's all about like, well, there's no sin. It's not a sin to want to live. At least in the Steinbeck one, that's what he says. And it's all about being honest with yourself and confessing the sins and trying to become a better person, which you see Gawain growing through. Because there's also a chance where he has a chance to sleep with this wife of this lord that he's at, but they just kiss, and then he returns the kiss. That happens, everything, but he doesn't sleep with her, and you just see he's starting to deny certain things to himself and grow up and become not just this childish person, but become this more mature knight. He basically grows up, and you see that through the story in the whole year that he's making his way up to see the Green Knight.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that's what, even though I was just explaining the story, I do feel that's what was sort of missed, where we didn't really see him evolving throughout the year. It was just, hey, it's a year later, now he has to go. And we see some stuff of him growing, but not as much.
Yeah, I think yeah, not as much at all until that final scene when it all kind of comes together. Um, but yeah, unlike the John Steinbeck version or even the original, which is author unknown, um, in the film, he's not a knight, right? He wants to become a knight, and so that's kind of one of his driving motivators, right? Is that he um, I think it's actually an interesting thing. As I was thinking through this, um, I think it for some reason in my mind, I found an unusual parallel, or at least a comparison with A Knight's Tale, which
Mm-hmm.
is a film that we both watched a long time ago and have watched many times since then and really, really enjoy. I mean, the two films are very different in every way, but I think at the heart of it, both of the protagonists in A Knight's Tale, I don't remember his name, but he's played by Heath Ledger.
Uh,
Um,
William
but yeah, William, that's right.
William Thatcher.
Um, both have the same sort of internal conflict or even a quest of kind of changing. You're in. I just remember that line in A Knight's Tale of changing your stars, right? And I saw at least the way it was shaped in the movie, The Green Knight. I felt like that's what he wanted to achieve. Where he wasn't a knight, he was kind of born into royalty, but really without. He was just a kind of like a freeloader, and that's the way that he was living. He's um, sleeping with a prostitute, getting drunk, coming home, in the morning after being out all night, just kind of carefree. And something that I really liked, because this picture of this guy's character or lack of character, definitely lack of all of the traits of what makes a knight, is hinted at right from the beginning. And I don't know if you caught this, but it opens with like this shot of an exterior where there's like some geese and just like some farm animals, and as it zooms out, the camera goes through a window, which is where he was sleeping, drunk at this prostitute's house. But then in the background, there's this building that's like up in flames.
Yeah.
And it kind of caught my attention. And then I think, I'm not sure if in the moment, I think a little bit later, as I was again going back and like putting all the pieces together, I realized right away they're showing us, and really what I think is one of the points of the movie is like that, although he wants to be a knight, he is immature, and he doesn't quite have it in him, because I think, he doesn't run. He shows no concern for whatever's happening, right? He definitely doesn't go to rescue, or to attempt to rescue, or to um, uh, address, what's happening in that building at all, right? He goes off to do his own thing. So I felt like that was a real kind of subtle way of, I don't, what I felt was ultimately, his major conflict, which is that, again, he wanted, I think he wanted everything that came along with being a knight, right? And he even shares it at one point, is that he wanted honor, right? And even though he had some level of wealth, because I think he even at one point, when the prostitute was telling him that like she wanted to marry him, he was like, I can give you, I can make you rich, without marrying me, basically. And she was like, I don't want gold coins, I want you. So he clearly, has money, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to be respected, he wanted to be admired, he wanted to be honored, to be seated at that table with those knights, serving Arthur. But yet, he lacked all the characteristics, that make a knight. And then perhaps he taps into something by the end of the movie, which was really interesting. I really liked that final montage looking into this potential future, as he's determining, right? As he's determining if he's actually, now that he's there in front of the Green Knight, who's wielding the axe, ready to bring it down on his head, as he's cowering and still in that moment, deliberating if he's going to go through with it or not. He gets this glimpse into the future, which ultimately impacts what he ends up doing. But I do. You mentioned, the movie not disclosing, why. It was very vague. His mom was into some, type of witchcraft, and seemed to have had a hand in somehow summoning the Green Knight on Christmas Eve, which is when he showed up, and we don't know why. We're left to speculate, which ultimately I'm not mad at it, but throughout the viewing of the movie, it did bother me, and I did want to know. In
Well,
retrospect, I think it's good to have to, again, as an audience, to have to, it's like a choose your own adventure. You have a say in what those motives were, what she was trying to accomplish, and for many of the other characters. But yeah, it was a little frustrating, and I'm sure other people
because
were frustrated by
I
that.
think the frustrating part about it, because me, I thought maybe she wanted it like to motivate her son to become something of his
Yeah,
life. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
if he took the
yeah,
chop, he has this year and all this stuff, but there was no guarantee it was going to be her son. You know what I
right,
mean? Because he
right.
didn't. It's not like he come out and said, "Hey, I challenge you." You know what I mean? To take a swipe. It could have been anyone of those knights who took up, and that's why that makes the motivation less clear if that's what she wanted, or was she just like, "Oh, I want to give my brother Arthur a test, for his
W-
knights or something."
yeah, and I wonder too, like how much Arthur knew. You know,
Yeah.
there is a scene, I think, right after, where um, Sir Gawain walks in, and Arthur and his sister, who's Gawain's mom, are having a discussion. You assume it's about what's going to happen, right? But it could have been something that he had a hand in, because I think that's a good point. But again, I go back to when the Green Knight comes and lays out his challenge. No other knight jumps at it, right? They're all older, they're all more mature, they're all more experienced and carry a lot of wisdom. And when Gawain volunteers to do it, one of the things that Arthur asks him is like, "Are you sure you understand like what he's asking?"
Yeah.
So there may have it. I guess what I'm building up to is again, and it's not explicit, it's not shared, but I guess it's open to the possibility that knowing Gawain and knowing his character, right, and knowing his strong desire,
Hmm.
and it's interesting. Again, it's a really interesting character, a really interesting acting performance by Dev Patel. With nuance and delicacy and sensitivity to the character that when Arthur invites him to come and sit next to him and he's explaining to him why he wants him to sit next to him, he has this real sort of reverence, for Arthur and for what that means. And he understands that like he's not worthy, even though Arthur's like, yeah, you're worthy because you're my family. That's why I want you here. But um, so yeah, it's just this young man, right? That is is just confused. Doesn't seem like he has a real father figure. Even Arthur acknowledges that. He's like, I should have put you had you up on my knee,
Hmm.
And with that lack of father figure, and this is me going way deep into it, but comes this lack of identity, in who you are, right? So yeah, it's this confusion between again this reverence and this understanding of what that is, but again, at the same time being young and kind of wanting it for the wrong reasons. And then you go on to see that throughout his whole sort of journey or pilgrimage to on his way to the Green Chapel to meet the Green Knight. But yeah.
Yeah, because I think my first note was like, what really got me was an uncle's regret and love.
Hmm.
Because when I became an uncle, before I even had kids, like it was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me. You know what I mean? Like I love all three of my nephews like to death, and just to be able to pour into their lives and have that, like I did feel, I'm like, wow, like what if I hadn't been that? What if I and I've had uncles that poured into my life, and that really did. I thought that was a really good point.
Hmm.
Um, and I did like one thing that when the prostitute that he was talking, when he's like, oh, I have to go, because he was looking for greatness, and she says, why greatness? Why isn't good enough?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for some reason, it just really like because that's before the journey even starts. I was like, wow, that's really really profound. Like, why isn't this what you have good enough? Why do you have to get greatness?
Yeah.
It's because you want it for yourself. It's for your glory, not for, hey, I want to do these things because it's good for humanity. Like you want it, and I
Hmm.
think the journey that he lays out, I think starts showing that even with the ending, when you say where he sees his whole life, he's
Hmm.
like, oh, there's all that. I could run right now and have all that, but that's I could have all this I want, like honor. I could become king, have children, get married, blah blah. But then I would have to run from this thing that he won't have honor because he ran from his destiny and what he said gave his word that he would do.
Well, yeah, and even though I mean he was able to attain again in that look ahead to this potential future, he was able to obtain. Um, I mean, he in that vision he becomes king,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a path, and a destiny wrought with destruction.
Yeah.
Um, when I first watched it, I felt like, and I think there's still it's still valid, and I think there's still some definitely some truth to it, but I felt like again it was about what it is to be a knight, but specifically that moment with the challenge. I felt like it was about mercy, because again, the challenge was specifically, like who is willing to come and land a blow on me. And I think he even describes it, like he says, you can lop off my head or it can be a scratch or something like that.
Right.
um, and again, which even emphasizes even more that Gowan didn't have a clue, or understanding about what this really was about. um, Again, in his greed of maybe thinking, oh, this is what's gonna earn me the respect of all of these men, and might even be the thing that grants me knighthood. He goes all the way and just chops off the Green Knight's head, which is then, of course, the expectation is that that same blow is what's going to be returned. So I was kind of thinking like, oh, it was he failed the test because he wasn't merciful. And again, I think there's some truth to that, but I think there's even more to it.
Now, like what I was thinking going towards the end and with the blow and everything, I did think I'm like, wow, you could just scratch him and then you'll get scratched. But then it was like, what'd you do? But I think it builds up to at the end, like, do you have integrity? Do you have character? Because he kind of lacked it with the lady, wife, because whatever she was doing and all that happened, he could have stopped it. He didn't, and he was trying to run away from it, and he still hadn't got to that part where I could be a person of honor, be have integrity. I'll tell you, look, this is what happened. I'm sorry, he was trying to run away from the Lord. The Lord's
Hmm.
like, listen, I know what happened, man.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the end where, and this is where why I like the app post credits, and this is why I love the ending. The ending really salvaged a lot of the movie for me.
Hmm.
He saw that whole future, blah 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 possibility, and it was, listen, whether I die now or I die later, death is going to come, pain is going to come, struggle is going to come, and he saw that. He's like, you know what? It won't be totally happy, it won't be totally sad, but right now I could be a person of honor, and I think he passes a test because when he kneels and he's like, you know what? Here, let me take this sash off. That would protect me. He goes, now I'm here. I've accepted what I've done. I've accepted who I am. He's being honest with himself, and he's like, this is the end of my time. And even when he says off with his head, I don't think that he dies. I think what the after credits reveals is he goes on to live, and he lives that life that he saw. You know what I mean? But he lived it while gaining honor through being able to say, "Hey, I'm here. I didn't die." And now it wasn't. It may have not been as sad as what it was because he didn't run away. He wasn't a coward, or he didn't lack honor. He kept his word, but he still was able to live that life because there's more ways to get to that life. You don't just have to say, "Hey, I'm going to break my word." You could keep your word and still go on. And again, I may be superimposing the fact that in the story he doesn't die in the original
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
He is forgiven, and I do think that's where, when I saw the ending and I started reading, I was like, okay, this is what I think it meant, and that's why they showed the girl at the end picking up the crown, because it really does happen. He does go on to live his life, grow old, and do all this stuff.
So the girl is his daughter.
Yes, from his second marriage, I believe. 'Cause I think he had a son in the first one, and then she died, and then he had the other kid. If I remember that, because it was all going by really fast.
Yeah, but I mean that if what you're saying is true,
Yeah.
then it would have been a different future. It wouldn't have been the one that we saw.
Well, no, because he still would have left there. Because
Yeah.
before he ran and fled. This time, let's say he was allowed to live and he just went back, he would have
Hmm.
still like, because I think he married one of them, and then she died, and then he married another one. You know what I mean? Like I think all of that still would have unfolded the way it would have unfolded. You just the only difference is if you did it with honor or if you ran away from the test that was before you.
Hmm.
Because once you leave that Green Knight's castle, your future's in front of you.
Yeah. Well, if I remember correctly, which I may not, like, doesn't every knight have to, like, pass a test at some point?
Yeah, there's always like going to get like what is it? The cup, the Indiana Jones, the Holy
The
Grail,
art.
and all that stuff.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Um,
And that's where they write your stories about in your songs.
mhm. Yeah. No, well, that was going to be one of my questions, later on
Oh,
based off one of the commentaries that I found, but about, yeah, because there are different interpretations for the ending, basically one with him dying and one with him living.
hmm.
Um, so it sounds like you're more on the side of he lived, he was spared, which is, I mean, there's good proof if that's what the original story was.
Yeah, because I think it's more of like not necessarily a redemptive story that it's building to, but just that he grew up, and we know these people in our lives who can't confront who they are, and I think at that point is when he did confront all the stuff that he had done leading up to this, and he basically grew up at that moment. He was like, no, and being able to confront this and actually grow. I think that's the point of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I were to argue, the other side, and I think this is kind of where I was landing at one point, although I I've changed my mind since then, and I also do think that it's more likely that he was spared at the end because he did demonstrate to learn his lesson. But I think if we wanted to argue the other point, it would be that he there are a lot of things, again, the fact that he failed every test along the way, again, going back to A Knight's Tale and that idea of, and even that comparison, right, where in A Knight's Tale he does successfully change his stars because while he was not born into knighthood, he was born into poverty and far from knighthood. He had all the characteristics, right? And he had the heart of a knight, right? And so he was able to, things lined up, and he was able to, make that happen through his determination and his honor and his courage and all those things. So he was able to accomplish that. I think it's interesting to look at this one as the opposite, right? Where he was, to a degree, did have at least some of those exterior, like he was born into nobility to a degree, and yet internally he was, you know, was devoid of all those characteristics, and the story went on to demonstrate how he failed time and time again. And I thought that the ending was him seeing that future of saying, all right, if I continue to pursue this thing that I'm not, but I'm trying to will it, I'm trying to force it, it's greed and the like, then it's really, although I may personally be able to obtain some of those things that I want, it's not going to have the effect or the result. It's going to lead to destruction for those around me, for myself. And so I felt like you can argue that at the end, he just came to terms and accepted, well, I am what I am, and I'm not what I'm not. So just kill me, and just kind of accepting that. I think that that's one way, again, that you could look at it.
But
It's,
I even think in your what you're saying this is valid. Like I said, that's why I like the open endedness of it.
yeah.
But I like even in the fact of him accepting I am what I am and I'm not what I'm not was him becoming no longer what he was.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because even in just accepting that, listen, this is what I am. I've effed up, man. I'm like I'm not who I want to be. I'm not this guy who's going to be a great knight. Blah blah blah. Just admitting that to yourself is such growth that it made him no longer the same person that he was along this whole journey.
Yeah, and I think one is just a an optimistic
Yeah.
angle, while one is more pessimistic, because I think just coming to terms with reality is growth.
Uh,
Like just
uh,
acceptance. right? So I think there could still be growth in that,
Yeah.
while also, because even what I was laying out, would have been different had he just passed that initial test of being merciful, right? But because he didn't, and then throughout, I think again it's a lot more, it's dark and more pessimistic, right? And ultimately, I don't agree with it, but I think it's in a way of just having an acceptance, right? Of not lying to yourself, right? And
Right.
just saying, well, I failed. I wasn't that, and I don't have a choice, right? If I come to terms with that, the only result is death, right? And is accepting the outcome, right? Because even if he says, well, I accept that, but I don't accept my fate, it still, I think, leads him into that uh, misfortunate future.
That ruin. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's both kind. I mean, I think, yeah, it's at least, if not growth, at least acceptance, right? And
Yeah.
and I think, in a way, right, that there is honor and chivalry in that, right? Because by
Yeah.
accepting his doomed fate, he's not putting everyone else through what the potential future could be. So I think, in a way, right, we arrive at a similar place. It's just one is a much more hopeful and optimistic view.
Yeah.
The other one is darker and not necessarily pessimistic, just darker, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I think for me, the deciding factors are the way that the Green Knight addresses him at the end, right? You can see in his demeanor and in his face, in his smirk and in his eyes, even, sort of like an agreement and kind of like a sense of pride, right? Like you passed the test, you grew, you've demonstrated, that growth, and then, yeah, I think I just don't see them deviating, from the original story.
Yeah. And I will say, because even when you were saying pessimist, like darker and lighter, I'm like, when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, I guess because everything I see, we see through our own personal worldview of everything.
Hmm.
And of course, my faith just always tries to put like a better, oh, what lesson did he grow from it? So I think that's why when I look back at it, I'm like, okay, so it was a not redemptive, but he achieved like this integrity that he found, and through that everything continues, but is different because he's different in it. He's not. He wouldn't be so. Because I guess in the future he saw he was always like sad and depressed, like
Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
knows what he did. So I think the future will still happen, but
Yeah.
him no longer being like, oh man, I know what I am. I
Yeah.
ran from this.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it is optimistic, and I mean, I think that he. What did you say? Or I think that he did grow.
Yeah,
And again, it's not. And I also think that it also is confirmed by the fact that in those myths, again, if I remember correctly, knights always have to pass a test, right?
yeah,
So it may not even be in the long scheme of things. It may not be that, you know this may have always happened the way exactly that it needed to happen, right? It wasn't just circumstance. This he may have. And again, in the also, yeah, in the original, he is a knight. So again, you could argue that that was always his fate, was to arrive at that place, but we just got to witness his entire journey and his entire transformation from being someone who's selfish and definitely unworthy of a high calling, to eventually arriving at being worthy of a high calling, which always comes, through humility,
yeah.
which again, I think is really cool.
Oof. I got a little gas. Yeah, no, like I said, it's and neither one can be argued that no, that's wrong. Like that's just whichever one we see. And again, I think that's why the ending redeems this movie a lot for me. Because even when I start going back and looking at it, I think if I get deeper into it, it would make more sense. Like when he was robbed, right? Then all of a sudden
Yeah.
his stuff all appears back in the house. You know what I mean? We can get deeper into that. Like, was that really happening? Was it more metaphorical for a person on his journey losing stuff,
Hmm.
and getting it back and, helping this lady find her head? So, like I said,
Hmm.
there was some parts that were just like, I guess, a little weird because they weren't being explained or told
Hmm.
in a better narrative way. That's why it's not a knock on the film itself. It's just ultimately the end redeems it a lot for me because I think it's more concise, even with its own, if that makes sense, even with its own open
Hmm.
endedness. It felt like a stronger narrative point at the end, as
Hmm.
opposed to the journey to get to that end.
Yeah, and I wonder too if this is just if if well, several things, right? Again, is because I as I think about that too, right, and I think, man, it was just challenging to endure and to get through because of the pacing, because of the things we're not told, and yet as I as we talk about it and dig into it more and I look back on it, it just feels so rich, with
Yeah.
meaning, right?
Yeah.
um that one, I wonder if part of it is just, again, what we've come, what our expectations for cinema has become, our short attention span, if we just kind of need these dopamine hits of act of visuals and action and a certain pacing and adrenaline and that sort of thing. Whereas maybe this harkens back to um, even before cinema, more of literature, right? And not having these expectations, but more of this story that's told that where, again, it's not even meaning and themes and things like that are not even as clearly defined, but in sort of then excavating, you uncover. Um, so yeah, I do wonder what's at play, and so I think that in a way, I wouldn't want to change anything. Um, I I just think that, not to sound snobby, but it does require us to push through our, again, short attention span and our expectations to sit through and endure. And I think if you do, then you are able to come away, with something that was really profound.
So, and the only, like, again, and I think that's all valid. The only one knock I would say is like it's hard because now that even that we're talking about it, I am seeing it as like, well, maybe like even his whole journey is just a journey of life for a man. Like when he
Yeah,
met Barry Keown's
yeah,
Koenig's character, maybe
Keoghan.
that's yeah, maybe that's when you're a young man and you meet friends, and he's like, hey, go to this river. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll go with y'all. And then that's when
yeah,
you lost everything that you had because you're just listening to your friends, and then because you think they know better, and then you meet this woman and you help her and you move on and all these things are like that a man goes through his life and we can get deeper on that. It's just unfortunately when I was watching the story, if I watched this movie and we didn't have this podcast, I would like I struggled to just be to keep my interest in it
hmm,
because like I said, like it happened and I was really invested in the scavenger and all them the robbery. Then all of a sudden I'm like that's resolved by him making to this house and waking up and all his stuff is back.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So I struggled like while watching it to remain interested because so much was like things were being introduced and then just let go.
yeah, yeah. But I think there is something to that. That
Yeah.
sometimes when we endure that struggle,
Right.
the benefits are great. So I just think it's in a different category.
Yeah.
That I think that if anything, that would be my bone to pick, right? That if you watch the trailer, and again, I think
Well,
because to draw audiences in, this
yeah.
has to be marketed and it has to be pitched a certain way.
Right.
And when you get there, it's not that at all. It's kind of like I remember when Drive
No.
came out, and a lot of people hated Drive. I love
Yeah.
Drive. It's one of my favorite movies. Or other
Uh,
examples
I,
like
I
that.
I would say The Bridge to Terabithia
Right.
is a great book, great movie. That trailer made it seem like it was the Chronicles of Narnia,
Yeah.
and that's not what you were getting when you saw
Right.
this movie.
Yeah, and there's other examples. So I think ultimately it is a little bit of a catch 22, right? Because I think in order to appeal, right, and to get people interested and intrigued in it, you have to sell it, or at least that's what they chose to do, right? I mean, you
Mm.
can't. How else are you gonna market it? You can't say like it's gonna be challenging. You're probably gonna be bored, but if you stick with it, it's gonna be really profound, and you can't. So I don't blame them for that, but I think that's ultimately where the disconnect is. We one of the movies you brought up in one of our 5 on 5s, I think, was Gods and Generals.
Yeah.
And so I think this is in one of those categories, right, where it's just different. I don't even know that it helps if you know that going into it. You just kind of have to, uh, even after watching it, I think you just go back and appreciate it. Again, it was challenging, but I still think there was enough. Again, there were times where even I felt the drag, but mostly, again, I was pretty engaged and wanting to see what comes next, and also the anticipation, of ultimately when we reach that green chapel for that final confrontation.
Yeah, like I said, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like I can see why it's like it got 50%, like we said. And there is something. I'm not knocking it, we should know what we're getting when we see A24. You know what I mean? It's going
True.
to be something different.
Yeah.
And I was even looking at the movie poster, the red and yellow one that says a Green Knight with his axe. I
Hmm.
was like, to me, even that's a little misleading
Hmm.
because it makes it look like it's this guy's going on this slasher thing.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not knocking it. I understand why people didn't because it's not a movie for everyone.
Hmm.
Again, it's not a movie that I would recommend to everybody because I don't think there's people who would like this movie at all.
Yeah.
But like I said, they shouldn't be ashamed of what they put on. It's not like, ooh, it's horrible. It's just I would have to implore whoever I told. I'm like, hey, let's have a conversation about it afterwards. Let's talk about what you thought about these things.
Yeah.
And yeah, because if I and again, maybe I'm looking down on people, but if I tell someone to watch it and they watch it on their own, and afterwards, to me, I'm going to think they'll be like, I'm never going to take a recommendation again from him because I don't think like they'll go deep into it because they just want to watch a movie.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think you're describing more or less a very casual
Hmm.
moviegoer.
Yeah, which most of the people I know are very casual moviegoers.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, there's there's really no way to avoid a discussion of high art.
Yeah,
It's not microwave. It's not easily digestible.
right.
And that's not what this is. Um, and again, I'm not knocking, again, the stuff that's more for the casual viewer, and you know, it's all good in its own right. And again, if you have a more refined palate that you're able to stomach, different things, then I think you're the more better for it. And I think that's for art, every art form. I don't really get paintings, some of them, not like other people do. I can admire cool stuff,
Yeah.
Banksy and other things. It just looks cool, but like other stuff that like you're supposed to stare at, for like 45 minutes, like
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff I don't get.
Yeah.
But more vision, cinema, music, and some of those things that's more up my alley.
Like I do think I am, as a person who loves movies, I think I am enriched by watching this movie. You know what I mean? Like I didn't hate it by any means. I do think people who truly want to love cinema, you know what I mean, as opposed to just there's people who just want to be casual, but people who really want to love, I think they would be enriched, even if they end up not liking the movie, just experiencing a movie that's different.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Something that's not the same way as everything. Again, I just, if I was as a moviegoer, if I had one, the quibble would be a slightly tighter narrative to just keep it moving a little bit better. But other than that, yeah, I do feel like I am a better moviegoer for watching it now.
Hmm.
Even if
Yeah.
the parts I didn't like, I could just be like, "Oh, this reminds me of that," and I didn't like that.
Yeah. But also, it would be unfair not to credit, the visuals,
Yeah,
the world building, the acting
the acting.
performances. I thought Dev Patel was great. I thought it was an interesting choice, because he's not a white dude.
Yeah.
Um, but
But he
but
looked really rugged in this with the
he
beard and
did. No,
everything.
I do think he fit the character really well though.
Oh,
Which again, I mean, diversity is great. I think when it's not forced, just to
oh.
meet some criteria. Um, I thought, yeah, Alicia Vikander was great. Joel
She played
Edgerton was great.
she
Barry
played two
Keoghan,
different
she
roles.
played two different roles very differently. Very
And
cool.
they didn't even look alike. I had to be like, oh, who's this playing the lady? I'm like, hey, it's the same girl.
Yeah, yeah. So, it outside of what we've been discussing this whole time, there were still other really excellent elements to it. So, want to
Hmm.
credit those. Before we move on to our reviews, I do have some fun facts to share with you, Kevin.
All right, we didn't have any deep questions, just fun facts. Okay, we're done with
We
our.
answered. We pretty much answered the deep questions.
All right, no problem. So that means it's time. Woo! Fun facts with Juan.
Fact number one: Director David Lowery initially had no intention of casting Dev Patel because the part of Gawain is usually assigned to a white Anglo-Saxon. But when he caught him modeling in a Zegna fashion spread, he was struck by how regal he looked.
Oh wow!
Fact number two. In the
Another
film,
one.
I think Dev Patel's also an underrated actor.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm like, he's low key. Like the ever since
Slumdog.
Slumdog,
Hmm.
the movies he picks, he hasn't just run out and done everything that's offered. Like he's done some really good roles.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Fact number two. In the film, the Green Knight arrives on Christmas Day. In the original poem, he arrives on New Year's Eve.
Oh,
Here we go, Kevin. These are
Another
these
one.
number three. These are the facts that I like. Really gonna feed your brain here. The five traditional knightly virtues are friendship, generosity, chastity, courtesy, and piety. Throughout the movie, Gawain, when tested, fails at all five. Friendship, after he befriends the fox, he ends up threatening it and chasing it away when the animal warns him about his danger. That was another cool scene I liked.
yeah,
Generosity, he gives a single coin to the scavenger and only after the latter explicitly begs for it. Chastity, he is seduced by the lady courtesy, he initially asks for a reward from the ghost of Saint Winifred for helping her. Piety, he does not want to attend the Christmas Mass at the beginning. This shows he is not ready to be a knight yet until his final choice at the Green Chapel.
Okay, I like that one. That was really good.
I knew you would.
Another one.
Fact number 4, one of Gawain's first lines in the movie, when he is at the brothel with Essel, is, "I am not ready." His final line in the film, facing the Green Knight at the chapel, is, "Now I'm ready."
Oh, nice. I didn't catch that bookend.
And
Another one.
the final fact, another one that I think you're going to enjoy. The ending was left deliberately ambiguous for artistic purposes. Director David Lowery has stated that even he and lead actor Dev Patel have different interpretations about what happened. After Gawain has a vision of the disastrous future which awaits him and Camelot if he acts dishonorably, he chooses to stay, removes the magic sash, and tells the Green Knight he is ready for his blow. The knight congratulates him for his courage and says, "Now, ... off with your head." Then the movie cuts to the end credits. This could be interpreted literally as the knight beheading Gawain, who has chosen death over dishonor. However, the quote could also be understood as, "Now, off parentheses, you go with your head," with Gawain being spared after his test of character. The knight mischievously running his finger over Gawain's throat could be seen as the blow he has chosen to return as the conclusion of the game. For the record, in the original poem, Gawain survives the encounter.
Dun dun dun. Very good. I like those. Those were really good.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, spoiler alert.
So, yeah, those were fun facts. Hope you enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed learning them and then sharing them with you. And now to our ratings. I'm going to come up with words to that. I think I got
Right
something.
on the radio. Oh, sorry.
Here come the ratings now. Here comes the ratings now. It is the ratings time. Okay.
Little Jerry's.
The Little Jerry's, yeah. For those of you listening for the first time, we do a Little Jerry's rating scale from 1 to 5. 1 being absolutely terrible to 5 being a smashing success. So for the Green Knight, for me, if you go back and listen to this and everything that we discussed, I think it only made me enjoy it more and more, while still coming to terms with the fact that it is a very challenging film, mostly for its pacing and the way that the narrative unfolds, although it has a great reward at the end. Again, challenging does not mean bad. It's not for everyone, but if you can endure and then undergo the process of, again, excavating, ideally if you have someone to discuss it with, I think, again, as Kevin said, it can be very, very enriching, much more than, some of the latest Marvel offerings, for example, if that's up your alley. So for me, it's worth it. I liked it. I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5.
All right. Good, good, good. Also, if you don't have anyone to discuss it, write us. We'll discuss it with you.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if I'll discuss it with you, but I'll read your thoughts.
I'll write you back. But this is what I can tell you. It's not a movie for everybody. Even if you watch it and you don't like it, it will enrich you as a moviegoer because you'll say, "Hey, I know what I like now. I know what I don't like." There's things that you can sit down and you can take with you and ponder. and it doesn't spoon feed you everything. The pacing is a little sluggish, so I don't think I would. I even while we were talking, I was like, who would I recommend this to? Because I was speaking even to a lady today, and I was like, oh, there's this movie. I'm like, I don't know if I would watch that. Watch this movie instead because I don't think she would have enjoyed it. So because I wouldn't, and this is taking away from even if I like certain things of it, because I wouldn't recommend it as much. It's still above average. I want to give it as good a score as you did. I landed around a 3.75 because it's better than 3.5, not as good as a 4. So I gave it a 3.75.
Okay, fair.
And mostly it's just because I don't. There's not a lot of people I would recommend it to because I don't think they would really appreciate what they saw.
Hmm. And then your opinion in their eyes would be tainted, and they would
Yeah, I don't
think
really.
twice before taking your next recommendation.
Like I was joking. I don't care what people think about me or my opinion, but like I just don't. I don't want to waste their time. They just wouldn't. Like if I recommend it, I'll call him out. My brother, I don't think he would like. He'd be like, "Oh, it was some cool stuff," but he wouldn't like it. His wife wouldn't like it.
Yeah,
So I would tell them like, "Hey, check out Mindhorn. You'll love it. It's funny."
yeah, yeah. It's true.
So I
It's
think
true.
yeah, that's the only thing that affected the rating in my eyes. While I did like it, I had my quibbles about it. Oh, before we end though, I forgot my two notes I wanted to point out. One, my MVP though was those puppets telling the
Oh
story
yeah,
of the beheading.
yeah. That was
The
cool.
girls were in there when they chopped off and the little red came out. I was like, that's awesome.
Hmm.
And that Guinevere was like the creepiest looking Guinevere I've ever seen.
Yeah. The old lady.
Yeah, I'm like, whoa, she looks like I didn't want to judge her. Like she just looked creepy. I was like,
Yeah, it threw me off too at first. Again, I don't remember it well, but I thought that Arth, in the original story, or just in the legend, I thought that Gawain and Arthur were closer in age. Like, because in this one, I mean, Gawain's like in his 20s, and Arthur is like near death. I don't think they were peers, but I thought they were closer. I thought that gap was a lot smaller.
well, I know they were peers in the fact that he was a knight of the Round Table,
Right.
but I didn't feel because this one Arthur looked like he was ailing even when he was getting
Yeah.
ready to send him on the journey and stuff, and
Hmm.
I think he was healthier than that at that point.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I mean? And I think the thing that threw me off about Guinevere is because it's the one who King Arthur's best friend betrays him for having an affair and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know who would have an affair with that queen.
You
And
should have.
again, she's probably pretty good looking. It's the movie makeup and the way they wanted her to appear.
Oh, that no, that lady's old.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She's I don't know their names, but the actor that
Oh,
plays the Green Knight and her
Kate
are
Dickie is her.
they play each other. They play husband and wife in The Witch, which is
Okay.
directed by Robert Eggers. It
Oh,
all comes full circle.
Ralph Ineson played the knight.
Hmm. Yeah, great voice on that guy.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
Legendary voice.
And there was another thing I just remembered too. Now that you mentioned the voice, like it was a little the way he said the last line. Now off with your head. Like he said it more cheekily than anything the Green
Yeah,
Knight had said before that.
yeah.
It was that tonal shift.
Oh, dude, there. You just reminded me another cool fact. Let me see if I can find it to read it, because I will butcher it. But it's not. It's not confirmed. It's like okay. It says in most, if not all, tellings of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, eventually the Lord, right, which is the one in that mansion,
Yeah.
um, he's revealed to be the human form of the Green Knight.
Oh,
But here the connection is left vague.
okay. Yeah, because he said, "Oh, I already know what you did,"
Yeah.
and I do. I do remember in the story, like when she kisses him later, like Gwen kisses the Lord because he promised to give him back whatever he got while he was there.
Hmm.
So that's why he gave him back the kiss and then left.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Sounds like a good time to close this one out. But this was fun. Again, if you're up for a challenging viewing experience, remember that you can find The Green Knight currently on Tubi, on YouTube, as on Vudu, and a few other sources. It's out in a few in a quite a few different places. If you don't mind ads, you can watch it for free. We thank you for listening. Remember that we've got a few more reviews before we take a break to and fire up season 3. So stick with us. Listen for what we have left. And yeah, again, thank you for listening. And I enjoyed this, Kevin. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you for enlightening me on a whole different perspective of this movie.
Come along and ride on a fantastic ride. That's sad music.
Well, it was supposed to be The More You Know.
Oh,
There you
all right. Later, haters.
go. Later, everybody.